Hey guys, Kendall Self here with NLC Production. Just wanted to talk today about our Dante system. Today we're going to cover what Dante is, what components make up Dante, the connectivity of Dante, and how you route in your Dante system. Basics of it is you have your console. Most of you have the Pro 2. You have a 9650, which takes the signal from the Pro 2 and converts it to our Dante network. And then you have the network itself, and then the components that make up your ears for your ME system. So the MEU takes that Dante component and sends it to the ears. Things to know is that Dante is a digital networking, which allows us 64 channels of audio in either direction. However, your ME system is limited to 40 channels only. So that's something to keep in mind whenever you're doing routing, whenever you're doing any patching from the console. Even though the console has 64 channels, your ears can only handle 40. So that's what we're going to talk about today as we get involved in the Dante network. As we talk about components of the Dante network, a key component is your Pro Series console. This console is what's going to receive all of your inputs from the stage and other devices and send it to the Dante network to be sent to the ears or wherever else we may send it. On the console, you have a center section here that has screen access, several buttons here, but the one we're going to pay attention to is the patching. You hit that button once, it brings up our patching screen. In the patching screen, what's on the left is what's coming into the console, and what's on the right is either going to inputs in the console, or if we select this I/O button, what's going out of the console. In this configuration, as you can see, we have these three white shaded ones on each side. This is our Dante network. The console can handle 8 more than what the Dante network can, so the first 64 is what we're primarily concerned with. But as we mentioned before, your ears can only handle 40. This side is bringing Dante back into the console. This side is sending Dante out of the console. So basically what we're doing here is we're going to find a source, say the input from our vocal matrix mixer that we have, and we're going to be sending it out here to go to our Dante network for the ears. These first ones are our vocalists. We then have the inputs coming from, for instance, this channel is the Nord in this situation. So this is where you're actually patching your inputs on your console to the Dante network, is in this setup. Depending on when or how your console was set up, these may not say Dante 1 through 24, 25 through 48. This is something that you go in and do yourself. And a lot of the newer consoles we've been able to set up that way, but if you hit this little wrench, you can actually go into them and type out what the name is. You can change the numbering. So in this situation, this first one is the same. In the last ones, we've had to actually type it out. In this, you go in, use your keyboard, type the stuff, so that you can kind of see where it is. Otherwise, it comes up and it just says AES 1 through 24, and then AES 2 1 through 24 or whatever. So that's just kind of something to note. This is all directly connected to your 9650. So the 9650 is what's taking the signal from the console, converting it to Dante, and the key component of that is this little green status light right up here at the top. If this is not green, that's where your problems can come in. You can click on this button. It will show you the health of your system. For the most part, the first 3 are for the console itself. It's your actual physical inputs on your stage box. The last 3 that say generic, or these could be switched, that say generic AES 50, those are what feed your 9650. If you ever come in, this light is red, and you come over here and you see where it is, you need to check your connections between the console and your device. We have had issues where parts of the ears didn't work, and that was because one cable on the 9650 was disconnected. So some of the ears worked, but not all of them. So that's one thing to make sure that you check, is that your status is in the green. And again, patching is where you're going to do all your connection to Dante. So next in line from your Pro Series console is the 9650, which we've touched on just a little bit. The 9650 basically takes the signal that the console puts out in the digital world and converts it to Dante. The 9650 does some other fun stuff, but that's a little technical to get into at this point. On the front of it, there are some status lights. One thing to note is, as we saw in the console, you have your status here, and you can see in this console we have 3 generic AES 50s. So in this setup, we're using 3 AES 50 out of the console to get to the 9650. In some situations, we're only using 2. Basically, that's just telling you how many channels you're sending out. As we said before, the Allen and Heath ME series will only do 40 channels, so the first 2 will get you 48, which is obviously more than what we need there. So in your situation, you may only use 2, you may have 3. On the front of the 9650, there are status lights as well that do what they call breathing. They will pulse in and out very slowly, and that shows the health of the 9650 connection to your console. If those are green, then everything is good to go. If they're a different color, red or whatever, on the ones that you have that you're using, then you need to come back to your console and check to see what may be the issue. The 9650 also shows status of the Dante network. That's just an LED that's either green or red depending on what issues there are in that situation. For the most part, it should stay green. If you ever see it going to red, then that's something that we need to address and we will talk about later on. So that's your flow from the console to the 9650. Once you get out of the 9650, you have an actual network-based system, which is what Dante is. Dante is digital audio network through Ethernet. So from that point, you have to have a little bit of network knowledge. So we're going to, on this computer over here, kind of show you the setup. Most of the Dante networks that we're setting up will use what we call a self-assigned IP address. I'm trying not to get too technical on that, but if you go into your computer, you go into the network settings, we should have the main Ethernet, which is your actual network in the building. You don't want to change that if you're using anything like this. And not every campus has this set up, and I'll talk about later on why some of the campuses don't have this, or why it's really not that big of a deal. But if you have to get into it, you have your main Ethernet connection, which you probably are not using. We have a separate adapter plugged into the back, which is converting us to another Ethernet. And as you can maybe see here, it says self-assigned IP address. And whenever you see this type of IP, and it has a 169.254.103, those numbers, the first 2 are usually 169.254. That just means that the computer didn't receive any signal back from the network, and so it's just going to give itself an IP. Most of the devices we have, the MEU, the 9650, come out of the box set up to do a self-assigned IP address. So shouldn't have to mess with that. In some situations, we have different IP structure set up. That's a completely different story, but this is where you would set that. Mostly you're going to do DHCP. It's going to give you self-assigned, and you're going to be good to go from there. So in this situation, we are connected. It's yellow because we're self-assigned. It's just letting us know that it's not a full signal. On this computer here, we actually have set up what's called Dante Controller. Once you open Dante Controller, and this is really kind of how you affect Dante, how you're going to patch Dante from device to device, how you're going to see status of what's going on, change a whole bunch of parameters. This is something that we try to get set and leave it there. We do a lot of just straightforward patching in Dante and kind of change it in the console or in the MEU depending on the situation. But on this Dante controller, this top area, if you have to get in and mess with this top area, is what's sending, it's transmitting. So in our case, we're sending from the 9650, which represents our console. It's very important to know 9650 is what it shows up as because that's the device that's connected. That is, in a sense, your console. So 9650 is sending, and we would be sending to our Allen and Heath, which is represented in this situation. And if you click the little plus symbol between both of them, it will open up this window. The green check is basically showing you what is patched where. Top section is showing you what the 9650 has. Bottom section is showing you where it's going to on the Allen and Heath. In most new setups that we've done, we've gone in and labeled these channels. So these channels will actually show you what's coming from your console. And again, it's only 1 through 40 that we can use. So if I scroll down, actually let me just expand this. If I scroll down here, we only have, well, we have all of them connected, but 1 through 40 are the only ones used on the Allen and Heath. It'll let you patch 64, but it's not using 64. And so as you can see on this setup, we're straightforward. 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, 3 goes to 3, so forth and so on, down to 40. In this setup, in this situation, there's not a lot of need to go back into the controller and do any patching and have to change anything. We'll do that changing in the console if need be, to get us to Allen and Heath. So in that setup, and what we've done on a lot of the different campuses, is we've gone just straightforward one-to-one patching, and it's pretty straightforward. If you double click on any of the names of these, so if I double click on 9650, it'll open up another little window. It shows me in the receive section where I'm receiving signals from. So in our situation here, we're actually recording multi-track and coming back to the console, so I'm receiving from this computer, which is Conway Audio, and then transmit is what's going out. So this is where I'm going to label what I was talking about before at the top. I'm going to label 1 through 40 or 64 of what's coming from my console. You can also, well, let's not talk about that. Status is just kind of showing you the status of that system. What the IP address is, it sees that unit as. So I can see here my 9650 has 169.254. If I was to change this, I can see the Allen and Heath. I can see that it's 169.254.11.255. So I can see those status things there. Just kind of it gives me a quick overview of the system. Device configuration, it's really an area that should be set up, shouldn't change. There's no reason for it to change by itself. So that should just stay the way it is. One tip, if you get ambitious and say, hey, I'm going to go relabel these device names, say I don't want to call it a 9650, I want it to be my Pro Series console name. Once you change that name, you lose all your patching. So it's something to keep in mind. It's very important you understand that once you change the name of the device, the Dante network no longer sees it, so it will clear all of its patching, which is very detrimental to your audio because it won't go anywhere. Network configuration, this is just kind of setting up how Dante is interacting on every Dante device, or I should say on most Dante devices. There is a primary and a secondary connection. There are certain situations in some of our campuses where we're not using a full network in the sense of having switches and other things. So we're coming straight out of the 9650 straight to the Allen and Heath, or we're maybe splitting off the 9650 on the secondary to go to another device. The important thing about that is if you are in a situation that, and actually in most of the situations, this can be set to this switched and not redundant. We have no system set up for redundant, and the reason for that is it causes some other issues that we won't get into in this demonstration. But so this would typically be set to switched, and that's where that would be changed to. So a very important part of the Dante network is latency. Latency is how much delay is introduced between devices. You want to keep that to a minimum, but certain devices only allow you to do certain settings. If you click on this latency tab, it'll show you the overall health of the latency of your system. As always, green is good. Any other color you need to address. Most of the time this is going to be fine. If you're having any issues, it would be a place to look just to see if you're having some latency issues and that's causing the problem in your network. If there is a problem, if you click on device configuration, which I'm in here on the 9650, it gives you options. You can see we're on the lowest that it will give us here for the 9650. If I click on the Allen and Heath, it's set to 1 millisecond. If you have a computer hooked up, it will not be available for you to do any changes here. That's set in the software for the computer for a different time and place to discuss. Basically, you want to match them up to their best. So if you're having an issue between a specific device, you're going to come to here and change this latency setting and find the correct setting that works for you. That should all be set. It shouldn't change. There's no reason it should change. But if you are having an issue, always good to just check to make sure you don't have any red anywhere in your system. So that's the most part of your Dante setup here. You can always refresh the network if you need to, hitting the little, looks like a couple arrows going opposite ways, which would mean refresh. And that is pretty much Dante patching inside the controller. From here, Dante is going to your Allen and Heath system, which is the MEU. The MEU takes the Dante network, and whatever order the channels come in to the MEU is how they are in the Allen and Heath, and then you just go in and assign the names so that it shows up on your controllers the correct way. So from here, the next setup you have is in your MEU system, which is your Allen and Heath. Just talk a little bit about that device itself. On the front of it, you have the 10 ports, which is where your ME1s plug into out of the system to go to your individual mixers. There is a reset network connection. The reset is just to reset the unit. You shouldn't have to ever use that, but you know, you can stick a little paper clip in there to do that. The network connection on the unit itself is where you're going to plug in if you need to make changes to it. And then you have the red and black Allen and Heath Dante card. There are 3 network connections on that one. The control network, never plug anything into that. It is for a separate thing that will cause issues to your system. The primary is where we're basically going to get Dante into the Allen and Heath MEU. And secondary, as we talked about before, is just another, we can do redundancy, or we can send it to another unit as a switched output. So that's the connections on the front of the MEU. On this computer here, I'm going to show you how we get to the MEU and how we set it up. I'm going to close Dante controller. Basically, what I've done, and depending on the campus, the MEU has an IP address that you have to know, and it's directly accessed from a browser. Most of the newer installs that we've done, we've added the MEU to the actual network that all the computers are on, so you should be able to access it at any point from any of the production computers. If not, you have to do some network trickery. It's really easier if you connect straight to the unit. We go back to network. Basically what you can see that I've done here on this Ethernet. So this is the wired Ethernet on the back of this iMac, and I've set it to manual. I've given myself an IP in this range, so if you're coming to your MEU and we don't have it on the network, your IP address of your computer needs to be in the range of 192.168.1, and then the next ones need to be anything other than 40 or 1, so up to 254. So in this case we have 192.168.169, and then the subnet mask, which is this next thing, is 255.255.255.0, and then router is, if you have a network at home, is probably the same thing, 192.168.1.1. What that does is it puts your computer in the same network space as what the MEU is out of the box. So once that's set, I go to my browser. In this case, I'm using Safari, and then I will type in the deal 192.168.1.40, which is the generic out-of-the-box IP address of the MEU. Hit enter, and as you can see, we have this beautiful Allen and Heath MEU interface that shows up. First page that comes up here is just a status. It kind of shows you what firmware you're on, shows you the temperature in Celsius, which is fun. Tells you what the audio source is. In our case, it is the Dante option card, which it should be because we're using Dante. And it just kind of gives a list of what ports are active, which ones are actually using the power over Ethernet, which any of your ME1s should be using. So that is kind of the status still. You have, before I get to channel setup, you have system setup, and the system setup is where we can actually set an IP address. I do recommend that you consult with anybody that's taking care of your network or with campus development whenever you're going to change this, because changing this IP address and not remembering what it is would render it inaccessible, and we'd have to reset everything and start over from scratch. So that's just something to pay attention to. Firmware is where we can update the firmware if we have a firmware update to do. But channel setup, so remembering that we only have 40 channels. This is based on your patching in your console. So when we did patching here, So what the first 40 are here of this, and then in Dante we went 1 to 1 if you remember. So 1 here on this Dante out of the console is 1 in Dante. So that's also 1 on the MEU. First thing to do is you do not want to have these checked. So I will uncheck all of these. Well, let me uncheck them all. Nope. Alright, so unchecking those because this is going to receive stuff. It's if it was connected to a different device that's going to give out the names. But here is where we're going to name the actual channel. So 1, I'm going to call whatever it is. In our case, I know that it's Vocal 1, so I'll call it Vox 1. And so forth and so on. One thing to keep in mind in your patching in the console and in the MEU is you can only do stereo pairs odd to even. So I can't have channel 6 and 7 be a stereo pair. I can have 7 and 8, and I can have 5 and 6, but not 6 to 7. Very important to know. If you have that situation, so let's say 7 is maybe your keys left, and 8 is your keys right. And then you click this little guy, you see there, do that. Now you have a keys channel, and you could just relabel this as keys. So that gives you a stereo group, stereo pair into the Allen and Heath. So basically this patching here, these names are what your ME1 will receive whenever you connect it to the network. This is where you're going to name those, where you're going to send it out to it. Again, it is all dependent on how your patching is in your console and if you've done anything weird in Dante. As I said before, we're trying to do 1 to 1 in Dante and handle all the other stuff inside the console to that. That's your patching. Once you have it all set, you hit save and it will save it to the system. Syncing. So now if I was to plug in an ME1, it should pull these, and then there's configuration on the ME1 itself that is done, but that's a non-Dante issue that we won't discuss in this video. So there you have it.